Hello students and welcome back. In this chapter we'll continue what we learned in chapter 16 on equilibrium, and we'll put some of that information to use. This chapter begins our discussion on acids and bases, which is one of the most important chapters we will discuss in general chemistry. We're going to talk about what an acid is and what a base is, according to our general chemistry definitions primarily, and we're going to work some problems calculating the concentration of acid and the pH based on that concentration. At some point in your life, you've probably experienced excess stomach acid or acid that backs up into your esophagus, which we call heartburn or acid reflux. Your stomach produces acid, a hydrochloric acid in fact, that's beneficial because it kills unwanted bacteria and helps break down food and activates the enzymes that break down food. But if it backs up into your esophagus, it can be painful and result in heartburn. We actually treat heartburn most of the time with a simple antacid like Tums or something like that. Okay, and so if you swallow saliva, that can also help because it contains the bicarbonate ion, which is a base, which can neutralize our acids. So we'll talk about what acids and bases are and how we neutralize those in this chapter. Acids have a sour taste. They have the ability to dissolve many metals, the ability to neutralize bases, and acids change blue litmus paper to red. So blue litmus paper was often used before pH meters were widely available, but we use it even still today as kind of a quick method of testing whether something is acidic and giving us a rough idea of the pH. Here we see an example of acetic acid, which is an organic acid because it has a carboxylic acid functional group, and we'll talk about what that means in this chapter as well. Here are some common acids you may encounter. Hydrochloric acid, which is found in the stomach, sulfuric acid, which is used to prepare fertilizer and explosives, nitric acid, which is also used in fertilizer and explosives, acetic acid, which is vinegar. It's the primary component of vinegar. It's used in food preparation and preservation. Citric acid, which is also used in food preparation and preservation, and again to adjust the pH of foods and beverages. Carbonic acid, which is found in carbonated beverages. Hydrofluoric acid, which is used in metal and glass etching and cleaning. Now this is very dangerous stuff. And phosphoric acid, which is used in fertilizer manufacturing, buffering, and it's also found in soda. According to our Gen Chem definition of acids, acids have a hydrogen that can be released in water to increase the H3O plus concentration, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. But the first type of acid we're going to discuss is a binary acid, and these form from hydrogen attached to a non-metal atom. And so if we look at the periodic table, that's going to be HCl, HBr, HF, and HI primarily. So here we see the halogens, fluorine, chlorine, bromine, and iodine. And these are the ones we see most commonly. And when those combine with hydrogen, they form the halo acids, HF, HCl, HBr, and HI. So these are our binary acids. Okay. We also can have oxyacids where they have a hydrogen attached to an oxygen atom. Some of these are, for example, sulfuric acid and nitric acid. And here we have another type of acid that has an oxygen with a hydrogen attached, and these are called carboxylic acids. These are organic acids, meaning that they have carbon in their structure somewhere, and they have this organic functional group called a carboxylic acid functional group, where we have a carbon double bonded to an oxygen and single bonded to another oxygen that's bearing a hydrogen, and that hydrogen can be lost to increase our H plus concentration in water. Next we have the bases. Most foods are actually acidic because bases taste bitter. The alkaloids are often bases. These are plant products that contain nitrogen that act as bases, and these are often toxic, which is why they taste bitter to us, because it wouldn't be beneficial for us to eat toxic substances. Bases tend to feel slippery in your fingers. If you rub your fingers together after touching a base, they have that slippery feel. They turn red litmus paper blue, and they have the ability to neutralize acids. Some common bases are sodium hydroxide, that's NaOH, potassium hydroxide, KOH. Here we have sodium bicarbonate, which is baking soda, sodium carbonate, which is washing soda, and ammonia is also a common base. For general chemistry, we have a couple of definitions that are important for acids and bases. First, we have the Arrhenius definition, which states that acids increase the H plus or H3O plus concentration in solution. H3O plus just means H plus has associated with a water molecule. Bases increase the hydroxide or OH minus concentration in solution. And then we have the Bronsted-Lowry definition, where an acid is an H plus donor and a base is an H plus acceptor. Now, in general, these basically mean the same thing. We mostly use the Arrhenius definition in general chemistry. Here we see an example of the Arrhenius definition. We have an acid that is donating an H plus to the water molecule and increasing the H plus concentration in solution. So what we see here is the HCl dissociating into H plus and Cl minus. So notice that this fits both definitions. It's donating an H plus, it's also increasing the H plus concentration in solution. So when we dissolve HCl in water, it produces H plus and Cl minus, H plus and chloride. The hydronium ion is an H3O plus ion, so when we put H plus into solution, it associates with a water molecule and forms H3O plus, or even maybe a network of H3O plus ions. So H plus is basically just a proton. It is a hydrogen that has lost its electron. So these are unstable and need to be stabilized by being associated with something that can kind of carry them around, and that is the water molecule. So they dissociate in water because the water can stabilize that H plus and carry it around the solution. Bases are substances that increase the hydroxide ion concentration in solution. Here we have sodium hydroxide being dissolved in water and producing Na plus plus OH minus. So we have the hydroxide ion concentration increased in a solution of sodium hydroxide relative to water itself. Here we have an example of a neutralization reaction which occurs when an acid and a base are combined. So the H plus from the acid combines with the OH minus from the base to make a molecule of water. And the cation from the base combines with the anion from the acid to make a salt. So an acid plus a base yields a salt plus water. So you should remember that an acid plus a base yields a salt plus water. And here we have an example: an acid, HCl, plus a base, NaOH, yields a salt, which is sodium chloride, plus water, okay, H2O. And so how does that happen? If we separate the ions, we have H plus plus Cl minus from the HCl. We have Na plus plus OH minus from the sodium hydroxide. The H plus combines with the OH minus to produce water, okay? And the Na plus combines with the Cl minus to produce sodium chloride. So an acid plus a base yields a salt plus water in a neutralization reaction. Bronsted-Lowry theory extends our acid-base definition a little bit further, in that it doesn't require aqueous solution. Any reaction involving a proton transfer or an H plus transfer from one molecule to another is regarded as an acid-base reaction, whether it occurs in aqueous solution or not. According to the Bronsted-Lowry definition, an acid is an H plus donor and a base is an H plus acceptor. So the base must contain an atom with an unshared pair of electrons, and it's that electron pair that will accept the hydrogen. So this is a little bit not written that well. So what it's saying here is HA plus the base has this lone pair of electrons, okay? So what's going to happen is that lone pair is going to attach itself to the hydrogen, okay? And that's going to form, okay, the hydrogen with the base molecule attached, okay? And then that leaves behind the A minus. Okay, so we leave behind the anion, which is called the conjugate base of the acid, and we're forming the conjugate acid of the base. Again, Bronsted-Lowry acids are H plus donors, and here we have an example. We have HCl reacting with a base, which is actually water. We're going to talk about water acting as a base and an acid a little later on in this chapter. So we have HCl reacting with the water to form Cl minus plus H3O plus. So notice that we're increasing the hydronium ion concentration in solution, so this also fits our Arrhenius definition of an acid, but it's also acting as an H plus donor because it's donating the hydrogen to the water to form H3O plus. And here we have an example of a Bronsted-Lowry base. The ammonia is acting as an H plus acceptor. The NH3 is plucking a hydrogen off of the water to form NH4 plus and OH minus, so it's acting as an H plus acceptor, and this makes it a Bronsted-Lowry base, makes ammonia a Bronsted-Lowry base. Now, we're also increasing the hydroxide ion concentration in solution, so it also fits the Arrhenius definition as well. Some substances can act as both an acid and a base, and water is one of those substances. These substances are called amphoteric. Notice here in the first example that water is acting as a base. It's taking a hydrogen from the HCl and forming H3O plus. In the next example, water is acting as an acid. It's donating H plus to ammonia, forming NH4 plus and OH minus. Here we see our Bronsted-Lowry acid-base definition demonstrating the reversibility of these acid-base reactions. So here we have a reversible reaction. Notice the two-way arrow. So we have arrows going in both directions. We have the HA, this is our acid. Okay, we often demonstrate a generic acid as HA, and the B dot dot is our base. Okay, it has a lone pair that it can accept an H plus, and when we pull the H off of the HA, we get A minus. Okay, and then we get the hydrogen associated with what was our base, the HB plus. Okay, so let's write that over here. So we have HA plus B dot dot, that's our base, okay, yields A minus plus HB plus. Okay, so let's define our players here in this reaction. We have our acid and our base, okay, because the acid is donating an H plus and the base is accepting it. And when we pull the hydrogen off of the acid, we form what's called a conjugate base. This is the conjugate base of our acid. And we form what's called the conjugate acid of our base. We form the conjugate acid of the base. Okay, so those are the acid, base, and conjugate acid. So notice here that we could write our reaction the other way. If we wrote our products as reactants instead, we would have this conjugate base over here. This would be our base now. And our conjugate acid over here, this would be our acid. Yields, and on the right we would have HA as our acid and B dot dot as our base. Okay, so this would be the conjugate acid of our base, and this would be the conjugate base of our acid. So we define these as conjugate acid base pairs. Okay, so we've got ammonia as our base, and NH4 plus, this is the conjugate acid of the base ammonia. And we've got water acting as an acid, and hydroxide is the conjugate base of this acid. So let's write this reaction. Okay, so water is acting as an acid, right? Let's write it like this. Water is H2O, so let's write it with the H that's going to be donated, separated from the other hydrogen, plus ammonia, which is our base, that's NH3. Okay, and this is a reversible reaction. And what's happening in this reaction? So the ammonia has a lone pair, the nitrogen has a lone pair that can actually pull off a hydrogen. Okay, and it's leaving this bond behind as a lone pair on the oxygen. Okay, and we form NH4 plus ammonium plus this hydroxide now is left behind plus OH minus, and that's our hydroxide. So this is our acid plus our base. Okay, and then we form the conjugate acid of the base, okay, and conjugate base of the acid. So our acid is water, our base is ammonia. We form the conjugate acid of the ammonia, that's the NH4 plus, and the conjugate base of the water is the hydroxide. So these are called conjugate acid-base pairs. Okay, a base accepts a proton and becomes the conjugate acid. An acid donates a proton and becomes a conjugate base.